Welcome to Talking Buffalo, featuring conversations with guests from around the world of sports, media, pop culture, and all things Buffalo, with your host, Patrick Moran.
Welcome to episode 921, Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo sports talk and more. My name is Patrick Moran. Big thank you to everyone out there, as always, for watching and for listening, for following and subscribing, helping this show grow on both the video and the audio side. I do appreciate you guys very, very much. Today's episode is sponsored by Imperial Pizza, 2 locations, the South Buffalo staple on Abbott Road, and their newer location, 1665 Main Street, not far from Canisius College. If you have not had Imperial, you're living under a rock, go check it out. One of the best spots you'll get anywhere for pizza, wings, and plenty more. Before I get into today's show, real quick, yesterday's show, I had a Buffalo Bills takeaway show, and over the first 5 to 6 minutes or so, I kind of embarked on a little bit of a Sabres rant. I was tired, I was cranky, watched the Sabres play on a Monday matinee, Veterans Day, at the arena, and they lost to a really shitty Montreal Canadiens team, a game where the Sabres scored 5 goals and didn't even get a single point in regulation. They lost that game 7-5. Anyway, I went on a rant, put the video up, and I noticed this morning a handful of comments from Bills fans, I would assume, bitching at me for having Sabres talk on this show. I feel like I need to do this every once in a while, so I'm going to take this opportunity right now. Love talking Buffalo Bills. That's what we're doing today, by the way, in most episodes. But this is called Talking Buffalo. This is not Talking Buffalo Bills. So I'm going to talk Sabres, might talk some Bandits, might talk some college, some high school, might talk some wings, some pizza, some entertainment, pop culture, all things like that. So if you're coming here just thinking it's going to be all Buffalo Bills all the time, then this probably isn't the show for you. This is Talking Buffalo. On that note, all right, this is an episode where we're pretty much talking all Buffalo Bills. I am joined right now, as I am every week during the season, by my buddy Matt Warren from SB Nation. What's going on, man? How you doing? Did you just get sick of me talking about the Sabres there for the last 30 seconds or so before I brought you in? Because a lot of people were yesterday.
No, I mean, I haven't followed the Sabres religiously since my kids were born, just because I've got so much else going on, and they haven't been very good. But, like, I love a good Sabres game. I love going to a good Sabres game. I'm going to be at the arena later this week. Well, actually, yeah, by the time you listen to this, for the Shoresy Fall Classic over at the KeyBank Center. So it's gonna be a nice little day. It's been a long time since I've been to an actual hockey game at the arena. I saw Springsteen there. I've seen like concerts there, but don't get to go see like the ice very often.
Explain to people who might not know, you say Shoresy, and they're playing the Sabres alumni on Wednesday night. Most people hopefully are listening to this sometime Wednesday morning beforehand. But what exactly is the Shoresy, the team Shoresy? I think I know. I pretty much know. It's from the TV show, right?
Right, yeah. So if you saw Letterkenny, it's the same guys that did Letterkenny. They did a spin-off show based around the character Shoresy, which was a character that was in Letterkenny.
Yeah.
And so they're coming and like raising some money and like playing against the Sabres alumni and all that stuff. It's just a fun night out with my brother, so that's gonna be fun. We have both enjoyed both of those television shows. Pretty hilarious stuff. I do have to use subtitles for them. I think that was when I realized I was like super old. I couldn't understand the accents they were doing, the voices that they were making, so I had to turn on the subtitles for Letterkenny and Shoresy.
I didn't watch the spinoff, but I did watch a lot of Letterkenny, and the hockey stuff with the Canadians is just some of the funny stuff. You also did mention, you told me before the show that you're going to be going to give some love here, Beltline Brewery, and you wanted to know the type of wings to get. All right, man, I'm gonna give Beltline a little bit of love here real quick before we jump into this show. They are to me, okay, so you know how I do my wing rankings every year, and I have my Mount Rushmore, so I got my top 4. And by the way, that will be coming out. We're getting near the end of November now, so early next year I'll have that. That's always fun to do. Anyway, I got my Mount Rushmore, and then I would call the next level the elite level. Like tier 2 is like elite to me. That's like the 5th they're like the 12th or 13th best wing spot. They're in that tier. That's how good I think they are. All dressed wings are really, really good. And they're traditional. It's called 716. That's
Mhm.
just like their medium or hot sauce, whatever you want to call it. It's kind of a blend in between the two of them. So that's what I would recommend going with. And if you're watching, if you're listening to the show, if you have not been to Beltline Brewery, it's downtown-ish, like kind of like Larkinville, like that area, but it's like pretty much essentially downtown, man. You're missing out because their wings are amazing. So go check
Yeah,
them out. But
I always check your wing rankings whenever I'm going to be in Buffalo. For those of you all that don't know, I live out in Batavia in Genesee County, and so I'm not in Buffalo all the time. So if I'm going to be, in the north towns, south towns, like wherever I'm going to be, I'm checking out Pat's wing rankings, or just DMing him and being like, "Hey, what place should I go to when I'm going to be, in this area?" And it's just really nice. Like that's how I went to 911 Tavern before Springsteen. Actually, speak of the devil, that's where I ended up that night.
that's why, yeah, 9/11 to me, they're the GOAT, man. They're the best. Anyway, I'm looking forward next week. You can let us know what you
Okay.
thought of Beltline Brewery and see if it's not just me, see if you would be willing to recommend those wings to the people who are consuming the show. Anyway, all right. So we're going to get into today's theme for me is look, the Buffalo Bills are 8-2. Very impressive. They have handled business. They've beaten the teams that for the most part they are supposed to beat. They are 8-2. And I know when you say, you beat the team you're supposed to beat, it sounds easier said than done. There's a lot of teams around the league that lose a lot of games that they shouldn't lose. The Bills don't do that. That's why they're 8-2. They are running away with the AFCs. I've said it all week. I'll say it again. If Del Reed's listening, get those t-shirts printed, the AFC East Divisional Champ t-shirts, because the Bills are winning this division. So what I want to do, though, is kind of there's a sense that even at 8-2, like I said, the Bills have not played a lot of really good football teams this year. They've played 3 teams
Right.
with a winning record as things stands right now, and they've lost 2 of them. So I kind of want to talk about this month because this next stretch starting right now of 4 games, I think is really going to tell a lot about this football team and what kind of team we might expect to see in January. Before that, though, some big news coming out of One Bills Drive on late Monday afternoon. Sean McDermott, when meeting with the media, and I got to admit this, man, I don't know if this took you back and caught you by surprise a little bit, but I was anxiously awaiting to see if there'd be any news about the injuries with Keon
Right.
Coleman, Amari Cooper, and Sean McDermott ruled out Keon Coleman Monday, which that surprises me because they didn't roll him out for last game until Friday. I don't know what to think of that. I'll ask you what you think about that in a minute. But anyway, Amari Cooper, we'll see how the week goes. He said Dalton Kincaid kind of ditto because he got dinged up. He hurt his knee in the game on Sunday. But kind of a bombshell out of nowhere. They announced that Matt Milano's practice window is now open. They got a 21-day, I think actually officially Wednesday, I think it opens. But so the Bills got 21 days to decide. They're not opening that window this early in November if they're not highly confident that barring something happening during practice, a setback, that Matt Milano won't be back. Logic kind of dictates he's already been ruled out for this Sunday, so don't get your hopes up too much for now. But the Bills are on a bye after this week. Maybe he comes back after that for the Frisco game on Sunday night. Let's start there, man. Your thoughts on the news Monday that Matt Milano, the practice window is now open and he may be back in 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's earlier than I thought it was going to be. I think I was on this show when we were talking about like I thought like somewhere in early December they would open that window to get him ramped up, mid December to late December, so that he would be like full go by the time the playoffs got here. And so having him back, what mid to late November is earlier than I thought it was going to be. Obviously, it's welcome news. He'll be back for the home stretch against the Lions, Patriots, Jets, and Patriots, which hopefully will be to secure a 1 seed or a 2 seed in the AFC, and like obviously that'll be important too. But I Sean McDermott has been really cagey with this injury all along. I know Joe Buscaglia has been pressing him at press conferences, no pun intended, for the last couple weeks, trying to get him to commit to when Milano was going to be back, and even McDermott had just kind of been dodging it. But then, like, 'cause, I mean, you remember early on, he said he might not even be like he wasn't sure he was going to be even back this season,
Yeah,
and so it was like just been like very secretive, not surprising with Sean McDermott. So I'm a little bit surprised it's this early, but very welcome news for me.
there's a lot of fans out there, and count me among fans who have been impressed with Dorian Williams. Okay, he's not been without flaw. He's still. I think he's improved as the season went on, and especially from last year. But he's still not the most fundamentally sound player. Like he could still get beat by play action and misdirection. He over pursues things like that. But you are also seeing the traits that he has, a traitsy guy that Dorian Williams is. I showed a clip on Twitter on Monday. It was the Jonathan Taylor run, the one that went for 58 yards. And
Yeah,
Dorian Williams is hauling ass down the field, full speed. This is not a DeMar Hamlin diss, but I mean, he blows past DeMar Hamlin. Like, Dorian Williams is not just faster than DeMar Hamlin. Dorian Williams is significantly faster than DeMar Hamlin. And you see that when they're both at full speed. And Taylor Rapp kind of gets in the way inside the 10-yard line, slows Taylor down, makes him make a little bit of a cut. Um, and then Dorian Williams saves a touchdown. I mean, this guy's just flying full speed. Most linebackers, like if that was DeMar chasing him or Balin Spector, he's getting past Rapp and he's going into the end zone. But Rapp slowing him down allowed Williams to catch him. And it saved the Bills 4 points on that drive. You're seeing things like that. Dorian Williams has had he's had a lot of open field like licks. He's been very physical. I'm impressed with this guy, but it's kind of a rhetorical question because I know what you're going to say, but there's no way that when
no,
Milano is back, that Dorian Williams is still a starter on this defense, right?
right. I really want Dorian Williams to be a good backup linebacker. Like that's just where I am with him. I think he took a couple bad angles in that game too, which allowed some of those long runs
Sure.
against the Colts. And so, like, he's still a limited player. I don't want him as my starter, but I'm very happy to have him, or even like a guy like Terrell Dodson who just got released by the Seahawks. I'm happy to have those guys as like a top tier backup because we've had so many injuries to Terrell Bernard and Matt Milano over the course of the last couple of years. Having depth there is certainly not a bad thing.
I'll never, ever, ever, ever forget AJ Klein in the role he was supposed to play in the playoff game last year. I don't ever, ever,
Out
ever
of the RV.
want to see that again. I'll tell you one thing about Dorian Williams being now who he obviously becomes that third linebacker. One thing I kind of like with Milano being back too is if Bobby Babich wants to go to a 4-3 at some point, like if you're playing the Ravens in the playoffs and they're just, they're punishing you physically, getting Dorian Williams in as that third linebacker in a 4-3 is pretty significant. I think the reps that he's got and the experience he's got in this year was huge. If something were to happen to Matt Milano, if he has a setback, if he gets re-injured, you're putting a guy in who's gotten a lot of experience this year. So again, I'm really impressed with Dorian Williams, but let's talk about Matt Milano here for a second. Like potentially, to say, hey, is he going to be 2022 Matt Milano again? I don't know. But they haven't played a game in like over a year now. But dude, he's Matt Milano. He's an all-pro linebacker. And if he's 90% of what he was pre-injury, and I would also note this too. The it was not a knee injury, it was not an Achilles, it was not an ACL. So it's not like what we've seen this with Von Miller and Trey White in recent years here in Buffalo, where they kind of look like a shell of themselves early on. That's not really the case with Milano. I remember going back to training camp over the summer and I was really locked in on him. And he started out camp slow, but by the end of camp, you really started to see the old Matt Milano. Like he was really moving really good. And then he got an injury at practice that had zero to do with his lower bodies, which is in this case is good news. What's your expectation in terms of what you'll see from Matt Milano when he is back on this defense?
Well, to your point, I'm glad that this wasn't a leg injury, and he's been able to keep that conditioning up. The thing I was most worried about coming into the season was he was less than a year out from that injury, and so I wasn't expecting his lower body to be 100% or even like 90% like at the start of the season. So that shouldn't be an issue now. He still has great instincts; those aren't going to go away. And so as long as he can cover the ground to use those great instincts, which I have no reason to think he won't be able to do that, then I think it's obviously going to be a really good shot in the arm for the Buffalo Bills linebackers. Again, no pun intended. I'm coming up with like so many weird connections today, like shot in the arm, like the guy gets an arm injury, whatever. Like, sorry, not
Look,
planning on this.
I look at it this way, with respect to Dorian Williams, who may have a good future on this football team, man. We'll see what happens with Matt Milano beyond this year. But for now, it's an upgrade. It is an upgrade, point
Yeah.
blank, period. You know who it's not good news for? Nick Morrow. I could see that being the Bills are going to have to make a roster move when Milano comes up to the roster. And I'm looking at the linebackers, and it certainly feels to me like, Nick Morrow could be that odd guy out. I know a lot of
Right
people.
now,
Go ahead.
right now they have that open roster spot from when they put Bale Inspector on injured reserve, I think.
Right.
So they still do have that open spot right now. That's a lot of people might be thinking that that's the Terrell Dotson spot. So we'll see how that all works out.
I was just going to say that
over the next day.
You beat me to it. I don't like to speculate when we don't have any concrete information, but Terrell Dotson was released by Seattle yesterday. Yesterday being Monday, we're recording this on Tuesday around lunch hour-ish, and it just feels obvious that Terrell Dotson ends up back in Buffalo, the fit. You're right. There is an open spot, but you're also going to have Smoot coming back. You're also going to have Dwayne Carter coming back. So we'll see how things play out. There's going to be a little bit of roster gymnastics going on. There's one or two guys right now that are on this roster that are not going to be on this roster for a stretch run.
Right.
I know Jordan Phillips is a fun guy, a popular guy, but I could see him getting released and signed back to the practice squad. And hey, you come up if something happens again, you got your guy there already. One last point I wanted to make. So you're right. Right now they have a roster spot. Let's assume that Milano fills that, okay?
Okay, sure.
And you have Dotson sign. I still think Nick Morrow could be gone. The other guy would be Buffalo Joe and Joe Andreessen. I don't know that you know how they feel about keeping their young guys, though. So plus is Spector done for the year? Does Spector come back? I don't know. I don't see a path to Bale Spector getting on the field again. So if they sign Milano and Dotson, or not if they sign, Milano comes up, and if they bring Dotson onto this field, I think Spector becomes we're going to keep this guy on IR for the rest of the year type of situation, because again, Joe Andreessen's a rookie. The Bills like to develop their own guys. And if you expose him, if you waive him and try to get him back on your practice squad, I think you're running risk of another team putting a claim on Joe Andreessen. How the linebackers shape out is going to be pretty interesting over the next handful of weeks.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I mean, Morrow's like one of those borderline guys. I'm looking at his snap counts right now. He got 16 snaps against the Ravens, obviously in that 4-3 heavy game. He got 14 snaps. He got 14 snaps in the Jacksonville blowout. Like, it's not like I'm talking defensive snaps. So it's not like he's like, a world beater that you really need to have on your team. It's going to be interesting, the roster gymnastics, as you said, and we don't know what the injury situation is going to be by then anyway. So, I mean, there's always, folks coming, getting dinged up here and there. So like that defensive line, yeah, you could see everybody stay healthy, and then they have to cut Jordan Phillips and Quentin Jefferson when those other guys come back. But you could also just see another guy get nicked up and miss a game here or there, and they have to kind of fill those spots.
Yeah, for sure. It'll be interesting to see. But like I said, the big news, the more important news is that Matt Milano is going to be back soon, barring a setback. And to me, that's just going to be a huge boost for the Buffalo defense down the stretch. Let's not forget, he obviously got hurt last year. So, when he didn't play in the playoffs, I can't get over, Matt. It's been 10 months. I still can't get over AJ Klein being out there with everything on the line. It's just, you don't ever want to see that again. But you got to get to the playoffs first. The Bills are looking in really good shape. Like I said, they're 8-2, but the true test starts now. This next 4 games, this stretch right now, arguably their toughest stretch of the season, because they did have Baltimore, they did have Houston on the road, the Jets on the road at the time, a big game. But you got Kansas City, which we'll talk about here in just a minute, this Sunday. Then you got a bye. And then you got Frisco. It's Sunday Night Football. Then you go on the road to the Rams.
Yep.
Who the Miami Dolphins exposed a little bit Monday night. But anyway, the Rams are a tough football team. And and you're at Detroit. That goes without saying. These 4 games right now are going to tell a lot about this team. But before we get into those, let's give credit when you get an opportunity here. Give some credit to the Bills for handling business. Because again, teams lose to teams that they should not lose to, and the Bills rarely ever do it. That does count because you don't lose games often anyway that you're supposed to win.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there was a point in that game where like it was like starting to get a little bit tenuous. The Colts could have taken the lead. Well, actually, they did take the lead at one point. Where you had the kick return fumble. Like, I mean, there was a lot of like these little bounces that could have gone either way. And the offense wasn't playing great. Josh bailed them out a couple times with his legs. He had some really good passes, but also some really like poor passes. It never felt like they were kind of on the same page in that game, especially after Dalton Kincaid went out. And so the fact that they were able to get through their top 3 pass catchers being out, especially with Kincaid going out unexpectedly, like I thought it was a very like I know a lot of people have used the word like gritty and gutsy. I don't necessarily love those terms, but I thought that they found a way to get the job done, which is always going to help them in the long run. We talked about AJ Klein coming off the RV and coming into the game in the playoffs last year, but like getting those linebackers experience now is going to only help them later when they need them in case of an injury later. And so having to go into 11 personnel during this game is only going to help them later if, for whatever reason, they don't have Dalton Kincaid. They don't have Keon Coleman. They don't have Amari Cooper in the playoffs. And so like trying to just getting through it and figuring out really deserves a lot of credit, especially in the middle of the game after that Kincaid injury.
When I would go back and I think of the Colts game at this point, it's been a couple days now. I look at it as the offense to me almost gets a pass for their mistakes, and they did some good things. I mean, they had some drives, they put up points too, but yeah, not having Cooper, not having Keon Coleman, basically not having Dalton Kincaid for the last 2+ quarters. That's hard for any team to overcome. But I also look at it as this was an opportunity for the defense to shine, and they completely took advantage, and they did that. Like the defense the defense keyed this game for the Buffalo Bills. 4 takeaways, 4 sacks, a big 4th down sack. Just some good play from Vaughn Miller, even though he didn't have a sack, and some pressures. He caused that second interception that Austin Johnson made. I talked about this a little bit on the show yesterday. Everybody eats on the offense is the mantra. Well, everybody was eating on the defense too, because there were a lot of guys responsible for some significant plays on the defense. So I kind of go back and I look at that Colts game as, you know what? The offense was fine, all things considered, and the defense really rallied around and carried this team. You got to have that sometimes. You got to be able to win in multiple ways. And the Bills, again, they look like that team, but they did play the Indianapolis Colts. Kind of what I'm talking about here. You look at the Bills' first 10 games right now, and 8-2 is 8-2. I don't give a shit who you play. But you look at this schedule, and you go back to August and September, and you looked at what this schedule is going to be. You're like, wow, if the Bills could go, their first 7 games or so, if you could come out 4-3, it's a pretty good start. If you could be 5-2, that'd be incredible. That's what the Bills did. But you look at it now, and you played Miami twice, both times with Tua, by the way. So, you're not going to use the backup excuse here, but they played Miami twice, who's only got 3 wins on the year. They played the New York Jets, who are an absolute underachieving, colossal disaster of an organization. But you played them in prime time, but they're not good. You played the Jags, who, again, going into this season, they looked the part, and they've played the Bills well. They looked a lot tougher before the season, is what I'm saying. And then they played the Tennessee Titans with Mason Rudolph. So a lot of kind of crappy teams there. They only played 3 games against a team that's got a winning record right now. They did beat Arizona in week 1, which Arizona's turned out to be a much better team than a lot of people thought. And they played on the road against Baltimore when they got shellacked. In Houston, when they lost by a field goal, but it felt like Houston could have put them away in the first half. It didn't just take advantage of those opportunities. But you look at the schedule, man, it's like 8-2 is awesome, but it's not really that impressive, is it?
Right. Schedule. I mean, there were two 5-game stretches we looked at when the schedule was released, and it was like at Miami, Jacksonville, at Baltimore, at Houston, at New York Jets. Like that 5 game stretch was going to be a really important stretch. They went 3-2 in that stretch this year, which that's fine, but not exactly great. Now
Right.
this upcoming 5 game schedule we have, or 5 week schedule, I guess, is the Chiefs, the bye, 49ers, at Rams, at Lions. It's another one of those gut check stretches in the schedule. So if they go 3-2 in this stretch, I think they can't go 3-2 because they have a bye. If they go 2-2 in this stretch, I think that's probably going to be like where we were expecting them at the beginning of the season. If they go 3-1, that would be awesome, especially if one of those wins is over the Chiefs. But we'll see kind of how it all shakes out. Those two big stretches from the very beginning of the year. The first one didn't end up being as daunting as we thought, but the Dolphins are playing better now that Tua is back. They just beat the Rams on
Yeah.
Monday Night Football. The Jaguars aren't playing any better, and their coach is seemingly imploding. But the Jets are still the Jets. But still getting those wins and stacking those wins early in the year has allowed the
Sure.
Bills to kind of like this week, if they were say 7-3 or 6-4 heading into this Chiefs game, they might be pushing Keon Coleman to play. They might be pushing Amari Cooper to play. I think you can make better injury decisions because the Bills have been able to stack wins. So it's certainly been a good start to the season. And again, as you keep saying, 8-2 is 8-2. You are what your record says you are. It's still good, and it's still going to help them set up for the second half of the year as we get into the playoff run.
Let's take here's what I'm doing. Take a real quick break, come back on the other side. We'll kind of go through these 4 games. There's a little more attention to this Chiefs game coming up on Sunday. I want to talk about a couple of the biggest keys for the Buffalo Bills to come out of this stretch in good shape, and a couple guys who I still think have the most to prove over this next month or so. So we'll be right back. All right, I'm back here with Matt Moran from SB Nation. We are going over what is going to be a tough stretch of games for the Bills. And again, a true test for what this football team really is. If you have not yet subscribed and you're watching this on the YouTube side, make sure you hit that subscribe button, smash that like button. Really helps us continue to grow this channel. All right, well, it all starts obviously Sunday with the Chiefs. This is the biggest game. The Kansas City Chiefs are 9-0. Say what you want about how they're 9-0, but they are 9-0. And it's as much or maybe even more because of their defense.
Oh yeah.
Why they're so good. And it's kind of going back to like last year as well. By the way, I saw a stat before we started recording this. This is only the 5th time since 1970. So you're talking over 50 years now, 54 years, where 2 teams that are playing each other prior to week 11 have at least 8 wins. So this is a big, big, big marquee matchup. But you talk about the Chiefs here, and this isn't so much a full preview of the game, but it's got to be worth noting. I talked about that defense. They're tied for 4th in points allowed. They got the 3rd best EPA rush defense success rate. They got some studs on that defense, led by Chris Jones, who Bills fans know all too well, unfortunately. Offensively, they're not really good, but I did see a stat. Sal Capaccio put a bunch of numbers. Popped out at me. As bad as this offense has been, they're actually 1st in the league in 3rd down offense. So they stay on the field. They sustain drives. This is just one part of the next 4 weeks. But how much does this game mean mentally for the Bills to get over? I don't know that it means as much as other people think because they've won. They've beaten the Chiefs now in the regular season the last couple of years. They know they can do it. The fact that the Chiefs are undefeated as opposed to, say, if they lose last week, if that field goal doesn't get blocked, because of course it gets blocked. But if they lose even just one game, the Bills know that if they come out with a win on Sunday, they're technically the number 1 seed in the AFC East. But that's not the case. You talked about it a little bit. There's no urgency to get, say, Amari Cooper back if he's not completely ready to go, or Dalton Kincaid. Is all hands on deck for you right now with this game? Or is this, I don't want to say it's just another game, because of course it's not just another game.
Right.
You get what I'm saying? What's the urgency level for the Bills to get over the hump, if there is one, with the Chiefs because I don't think beating them in the regular season really means anything right now.
Right, I think that's right. And Brandon Bean probably said it best when they traded with the Chiefs in the draft. Like, we're going to do what's best for the team, not like chase the Chiefs boogeyman. And so, if that was a paraphrase, he did not use the term boogeyman, but like, I'm not worried about the Chiefs this week. I know CBS is sending the NFL Today out there. The game's going to be coast to coast. There's only one 425 game on CBS, so literally every single person's going to see it. It has the feel of a much bigger regular season matchup, but um, like it's funny. My boss is a Chiefs fan now, and he said his son was like, "I hope we lose to the Bills again in the regular season so we can beat them in the playoffs." Like, that's kind of where I'm at right now. Like, I don't really care what happens in the regular season because we had them in Buffalo and they still beat us in Buffalo. We have had them in Kansas City. We were up like points with 13 seconds left. We still couldn't beat them. So like, I don't really care the outcome of this game as much as I care about the playoff game. I know this sounds weird to say, but like that it would be great if they won this game, but I'm not like rushing back those injured players just to make it work. I'm not, I'm
Right.
not pulling out all the stops. I'm not, going for it on every fourth down or well, damn sure not calling fake punts to DeMar Hamlin or whatever. I'm not pulling out all the stops to win this regular season game. Yeah, I'm going to do what's best for the team over the course of the long haul and then see what happens in the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. I'm with you there too because it's like I'm not saying I don't want to win the game. Of course, you want to see the Bills win the game, but I'm not willing to put Amari Cooper out there if he's only
Right.
75%, where I know that you got to buy. So you basically got 2 weeks to get him to 100%. Because again, this is a tough stretch. This isn't one tough game. This is a tough stretch coming up. So I'm not willing to risk getting guys out there early. And I'm also, as stupid as this might sound to some people, if the Bills got a trick or two up their sleeve, hopefully something better than a DeMar Hamlin fake punt, I hope hold on to that. Like
Yeah.
I want to see it in the playoffs. Whatever,
Mhm.
wrinkles they may have that if we haven't seen it yet, save it for January. I don't need to see it now. There are 2 reasons why I do think this game is huge, though. One of them actually does matter more than the other. Even if you can't catch the Chiefs, like even if you beat them, but you got tough games. The Chiefs probably finish 15-2 at worst, I would
Mhm.
say this year. And if they win this game, the 1972 Miami Dolphins might start sweating just a little bit. In fact, a lot. But the number 2 seed is very much in play. So winning this
Oh, yeah.
game would be big. I want to be in Orchard Park potentially for, the first 2 rounds, the wild card and the divisional round. Now the Bills did that last year. It didn't end up mattering, but that's okay. I want that again. I'd rather play in Orchard Park than play at Baltimore, or play at Pittsburgh, or play at Houston or something like that in round 2. So to me, that matters. And this might not matter as much to the team because they probably block out a lot of this. But just for my own sanity, I don't want to, God, Nick Wright, Stephen A. Smith, all the national talking heads. If the Bills lose this game at home, whether the injuries end up being a factor or not, I just don't know that I have the mental capacity to deal with the Bills are frauds, the Chiefs are unbeatable, the narrative that you're going to see from the national media all week. And again, I completely and openly admit this. I know it shouldn't be a big deal, but it's going to be a big deal. Conversely, if the Bills win, you know how it's going to be as well. So I don't know. Does the national narrative mean anything to you? Probably not. I mean, you probably block it out almost as much as the players do, even though you are part of a national said media outlet yourself here. But you know what I'm saying. That narrative is going to be
Yeah.
really strong one way or the other for the Bills.
Right. As a fan, I don't buy into the narratives very much, but like as a media person, yeah, the narratives matter. I mean, I'm gonna have to read about it in lots of different places, no matter what the outcome is, one way or the other.
Sure.
And so, I would much rather read cool stuff about how the Bills slayed the Giants or like, whatever it happens to be. But the, I it's not going to matter for the success of the Bills season what happens this week. I don't
Right.
like it does. I don't even think it matters if the Bills play the Chiefs in Arrowhead or here in Western New York. No, they should have won the game in Arrowhead. They were up with 13 seconds left. Like didn't have anything to do with the fans in that stadium. And so I think that the Bills have shown they can go anywhere and win anywhere against any team. I'd rather it be in Buffalo. That would be so cool to, clinch an AFC championship in Buffalo. But,
I
I don't
get
think it's like
it.
the biggest thing, that's going to happen. And I honestly don't think the outcome of this game, to your point earlier, is going to impact that very much at all anyway, because I don't think the Chiefs have, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 losses in their bag, where the Bills, like, are probably going to have a miscue here or there and lose one of those games to one of those other tough opponents. And so the
Sure.
Bills would really have to run the table in order to have that conversation with the way that the Chiefs schedule is looking.
I'll tell you though, we say that, and then you go back to the Chiefs and you look at last week. They should have lost at home to Denver. There's 2 or 3 games that they easily could have lost this season. They've had a lot of luck, lady luck on their side, which again, good teams got to get lucky as well. And the Bills, to some extent, they know that all too well. You know, I get annoyed because it's like the narrative, and it's true to an extent. I get it, but like the Chiefs are superior to the Bills when it matters. That I don't buy that. 13 seconds was 13 seconds. The Bills were the dumbest coaching blunder in the history, maybe of certainly of the organization, away from beating the Chiefs. And then you go back to last year. The Bills should have won that game. The Bills were leading in the second half of that football game. Some costly mistakes, a lot of it self-inflicted. The Stephon Diggs
Mhm.
drop, the missed field goal. Who knows how that ends up playing out? But the Bills, it wasn't like the Chiefs were the better team. And the Bills were absolutely crippled with defense last year. I mean, with
Mhm.
injuries last year, especially on the defensive side of the football. So I just don't buy that narrative that Kansas City's like in a separate class than the Buffalo Bills. It just, no matter how much.
So
Plus,
everybody else, yeah.
there's a lot of new players too, Matt. Like we're like, well, we've seen this story before. The Bills win in the regular season, they lose to the Chiefs in the playoffs. It also feels a little different, this football team, to me. I've been saying it all year. There's something about this Buffalo Bills 2024 team that feels a little bit different than the last couple of years. I don't know, maybe some
Mhm.
people don't agree with that. Bobby Babbage, first year defensive coordinator. You got some guys who are out, who, God willing, will be back, are healthy come playoff time this year. So I don't know. It is just one game. Though. It's just one game. Part of a tough stretch is what I was talking about. So
Right.
then you get your bye, and you got Frisco. See, Frisco's only 5-4 right now, but they've been hit. I'm talking about the Bills getting decimated by injuries. What about the Niners? McCaffrey's barely played this year. Brandon Ayuk is done. They've had a lot of injuries, and that defensive line, man, they still got Nick Bosa and Javon Hargrave and Malik Collins, Leonard Floyd, who we know. Fred Warner, maybe the best linebacker in the NFL. And now McCaffrey's back. And you still got Debo on the offensive side. Jawan Jennings is really good. George Kittle. Brock Purdy's pretty good quarterback. It's going to be a tough test right there going back to back and coming off of, you got to buy, which is nice to be able to prepare. But Frisco's a really good team. It baffles me what their record is right now this year. It's crazy.
Yeah, they've got a couple close losses, and like you said, the injuries, like they lost by 1 score to the Vikings in week 2. They lost by a field goal to the Rams in week 3, and that was all with McCaffrey out. They lost to the Cardinals by 1 point in week 5, again with McCaffrey out. The only time they actually like lost a game was against the Chiefs. They lost 28-18, and they really like didn't get their feet under them at all during that game. But other than that, they've played really, really well. They've beaten somewhat of a weak schedule: the Jets, the Patriots, the Seahawks, the Cowboys. Who would have thought that would be like a weak game? But and then they beat the Buccaneers, who seem to be like one of those middle tier teams. And so, like, they're another one of those teams that like you look at their schedule and like you think that they should be doing better. Um, but like to your point before, with the Bills being 8-2, like take care of business. 8-2 is, you know, 8-2. It's still good. Whereas the 49ers haven't been able to do that, and they're 5-4.
Yeah, they got a championship pedigree though too. Like I said, and some
Yep.
of those guys getting back, it's going to be a very tough game.
But they
Uh,
also have a big game coming up next week. They're at the Packers the week the Bills are on the bye, and so that's a much more important game for them than the
sure.
Bills game. And so and hopefully they'll be a little bit beat up, and they go at Green Bay, then fly back to
Yeah,
San
I was going to
Francisco,
say
then
going.
all the way back to Buffalo.
Sure, that's
So
a factor for sure. If you're looking for reasons for optimism when you're playing the
right.
Niners, sure. You're coming off a bye. Matt Milano might be back. The energy he's going to give, that crowd just being on the field, and Frisco coming to Buffalo, as opposed to say if Buffalo had to fly out to the West Coast, which they do the following week though. because,
Right.
you look at the schedule 6, 7, 8 weeks ago, and you're like, oh, the Rams, that kind of feels like the indie game kind of going into this past week. But I don't buy that. Now, I know they lost at home to the Dolphins on Monday Night Football, but this is still a pretty dangerous football team to me, despite their record. Again, health has been an issue. They've had some key injuries. Puka Nakua's been hurt. Kupp has been hurt. Those guys are both back. Stafford is obviously a great quarterback. Karen Williams is a touchdown machine. He is a great all-around guy. DeMarcus Robertson's a weapon on that offense. And they still got some pretty good defensive players. Like, I was impressed with their defense watching them on Monday night. That Jared Verse, that rookie, he is really, really good. I'd say the Rams' weakness might look like their offensive line. Like, they did a really pretty shitty job of protecting Stafford on Monday night. But you know what? It's a week-to-week league. I get it. But you can throw that game out. The Rams are going to be a very, very tough test for the Bills on the road as well after playing the last two, teams that were played in the Super Bowl. I'm not going to say let down, but, it might creep in your mind a little bit. That's going to be a tough game.
Yeah, the Rams were 1-4 in their first 5 games when they didn't have Cooper Kupp and Puka Nakua. Like, I mean, we just talked about it with the Bills being down their top 3 pass catchers. Like, it's tough to win in this league when you're missing so many key guys on your offense. And the same with the 49ers. We talked about them. So, like, now that those guys are back and healthy, they think that they can go on a run and win the NFC West just like the 49ers do. So it's going to be interesting to watch that division down the stretch. But more importantly for the Bills, like, San Francisco and the Rams are going to be pretty darn close to 100% by the time Buffalo sees them.
Yeah, look, and then the last game, do we got to even talk about Detroit? Do we even need to talk about them? You know what Detroit
They're really good,
is,
man.
They are really, really good all the way around. Losing Hutchinson was big, though. But, I mean, they traded for Zadarius Smith, who hasn't played yet for him, but he will. But that's a big-ass blow. But even if there's a team that's talented enough out there that can withstand that, I would make an argument at 1 through 53, there is not a better football team in the NFL than the Detroit Lions. And you're playing them in Detroit. You know that's going to be a big test for them. As fun as this game this week is, I think that Bills-Detroit game on a national level might even be more fun for a lot of fans because, if you're not a fan of your hometown team, I bet you there's a lot of, when you see the Bills travel every week on the road, how great the fans are. Detroit's a very popular team too, because neither of these teams win shit,
Right.
So these are two teams that I feel like the nation, if your team can't win it, let's get a Bills-Detroit Lions Super Bowl. I feel like there's a lot of people out there. But what a way to end a brutal 4th game stretch, having to go to Detroit. Just weapons galore on both sides of the ball, right?
Yeah, I mean, if we can pick off Jared Goff 5 times in a game, we might have a chance to win. That didn't even work out. Didn't even work out for the Texans. But, like, no, they're a very good team. Obviously, they play in that dome, and they just have so many ways they can beat you. Dan Campbell's an excellent, excellent coach. I think they've got 2 of the best coordinators in the NFL. There's so many ways that they can beat you. And like we just talked about it with the Bills defense picking up the offense on a day where the offense may have lost part of their fastball. Like, the Lions can do that too. And they showed that, this past week in their gutsy win too. Like, we keep using that term gutsy, but like they can win a multitude of ways and just find ways to win. And they don't get rattled. They figured out how to win. You remember how when really crappy teams start to get better, but they lose those close games. Like, the Lions don't do that anymore. The Lions win those close games. They're just a very, very solid 1 through 53 team, and the coaching staff as well.
For sure. I look at it, again, that game's a month away. I don't want to deep dive into that game right now, but I can't help but think about how good they are offensively on all levels of offense. You got the receivers, Amon St. Brown and Jamison Williams, who's a beast, by the way. He's a very good receiver. Laporta's a great tight end. And then you got Gibbs and Montgomery at running back. 2 guys who could kill you, man. It's just going to be daunting. This next 4 games is going to be daunting for the Bills. And we've been talking about it from a team aspect. I think, so that's a true test. I also think it's going to be a true test for a couple of players specifically. And let me make a little bit of a confession here. So typically, not a confession, but I usually send Matt an outline, like some bullet points. hey, this is what we're going to be talking about on the show. So if you want to, be prepared for whatever. I had two players specifically that I think was going to be a true test. Well, it will be this week for one of them at least anyway. But I had Dorian Williams on there. If all things go well, this is going to be the last game Sunday where you see Dorian Williams out there with the starters. Maybe not so much him. And then the other guy, you want to talk about a guy who I think is going to get tested. We're going to learn a lot about him. To me, it's Damar Hamlin. Damar Hamlin, to me, he's perceived as the weak link on this defense. I think it's fair to say that he is the weak link on this defense right now. That's not to say that he's been terrible, because I think over the last month, he's been significantly better than he was the first month of the season. I think he's made some improvements. He looks more fundamentally sound. I think he's doing a way better job of tackling, being active, being involved in plays. And he's also showing to have a nose for the football, which I think is very important for his safety. Being in the right place, right time to get that gift interception. Or when Groot makes a strip sack fumble, you're there to fall on the football. Right place, right time. A nose for the football. Jordan Poyer was like that for years with the Bills. Those are the good things. The bad things, he's just not athletic enough. He's just not. You saw it on Sunday. Jonathan Taylor, he gets caught flat-footed, or if he takes a bad angle, he's just way too slow. Simple as that. He's not athletic enough, but I don't think the Bills are going to Cole Bishop. I don't think Micah Hyde's coming back. Never say never, but I don't think he's coming back. So for better or for worse, Damar Hamlin's going to be your guy this year, that last line of defense. I don't think we've learned a ton about him yet, but we're going to over the next month. I think when I go both sides of the football, he's the guy who probably has the most to prove. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, probably. Obviously, we're gonna we're gonna talk about Josh Allen down the stretch with like his MVP, like um, candidacy and all that stuff, and like trying to prove to the rest of the league that he can sustain some of his crazy numbers for an entire season. But with the guy that's like the weak link of the team, or with the most to prove as far as like the basement of what he can do, I think that's probably the right answer. And like you said, with Dorian Williams, he's probably not going to be on the field for very much longer now that Matt Milano's practice window is open. I'm still a little bit bullish on Micah Hyde coming back. There's too many of the beat reporters talking about it
Oh,
to think
yeah.
that there's not like some smoke going on there. There's not some conversations being had, and like say they get blown out by the Chiefs this week or something, and or Hamlin lets, I don't know, one deep pass or whatever happens. Like, you're going to start hearing those calls more heading into that bye week. Like, get Micah Hyde in the building, get him start ramping up and things like that. So yeah, it's probably Hamlin.
It is definitely Hamlin. It's definitely Hamlin. I promise you this much too. The Micah Hyde chatter over the last, I could say for 10 days, it is legit smoke. It's legit smoke. I don't know. I wouldn't bet that it's going to happen, but there's legitimacy to it. I'm really highly confident in saying that right now. In fact, there was a part of me, we're recording this on Tuesday. There was, as recently as a week ago, there was a part of me that was almost willing to wager money that Micah Hyde was going to sign this week before the Chiefs game. Now play against the Chiefs, obviously a bye week after that, and then be on the field for the Frisco game. That said, the veteran that he is, when I go back to Damar Hamlin, having the most to prove, if he has a lousy game in Orchard Park on Sunday, you might see Micah Hyde signed on Monday with the bye week and him ramping up and getting ready maybe for Frisco, but certainly the following week at the Rams. So I don't think Damar Hamlin's spot is secure on this team outside of the organization. I do think, in fact, I'm confident that they will not go to Cole Bishop this year. I just don't think the Bills think he's ready right
I think that's right.
now. So this is a big game potentially for who now? For Damar Hamlin. I almost lost my train of thought there. For Damar Hamlin on Sunday. There's also a school of thought, though, that what does it say? If you're 8-2, his teammates love Damar Hamlin, and he's played okay. He's been fine,
Right.
especially the last month. But you're 8-2. Do you really want to mess with that chemistry? And you want a guy come in? I mean, Micah Hyde's certainly not an outsider. He played so many years with the Bills. Do you really want to mess with that? Just getting Damar out of there. What does that say? Maybe if you bring back a guy who's been sitting on the couch for the last basically 10 months now or something like that. And then he's going to be your starter. I don't know if that's the right message, or maybe I'm just looking way too much into that.
Was he at the Halloween party? I don't know if like Hyde's been like around the team, the dudes. I mean, like I know not at the facility, but like, has he been, I'm sure he's been text messaging with folks, but like, has he been there? Like, I mean, they're not going to, I don't know. I think it's different. Like a guy like Quentin Jefferson, Jordan Phillips, those guys can come back and take over for a guy like Eli Angu, who like has been working his butt off in the practice room or the practice squad all year, and like they took his spot. Like, and so I get why you might say that and like why you might think it's a thing, but I don't know. I think if you could plug in a former All Pro, a guy that is well liked among his teammates and all that stuff, I just don't know if it'll be such a big deal there.
Let me say this with confidence. We're recording this on Tuesday. 7 days from now, the Micah Hyde chatter is going to end. It's going
one way or the
end.
other.
if the Bills are signing him because of performance, if the Bills sign him, it will happen in the next 7 days. If they don't, he's not signing unless if something, then injury could come into play. It could be week 16. They could be playing the Patriots in week 16. And if DeMar Hamlin goes down, or maybe even if Rapp goes down, then you give Micah Hyde that call, emergency situation. But if it's performance related, you're going to know in the next 7 days if Micah Hyde's going to be on this team this year. So that's individually. I would also say just the pass defense in general has got a huge test over him over this next month. You're going to see DeAndre Hopkins and Kelsey on Sunday. You're going to see Deebo Samuel, Kittle, McCaffrey, Jennings the following week. You're going to see Nakua and Kupp in LA. You're going to see St. Brown, Williams, Gibbs, Laporta in Detroit. Like, how good is this Bills pass defense? Christian Benford has been outstanding. To me, he's been low-key one of the better corners in the NFL. Rasul Douglas is a good playmaker. I actually thought Rasul Douglas had kind of a mediocre game against the Colts. I called it out, but I noted that he's going to get tested a lot. Like I said, Hamlin, Rapp back there, just the pass coverage in general. I think we're going to learn a lot more about this pass defense over this next month.
Yeah, I think that's right. Douglas seems to be out of position a little bit. Plus, with Benford on the other side, they're going to test Douglas more because Benford's been playing so well. So you got to go one or the other, and I think that that's probably right. We keep talking about the pass rush. We want more out of the pass rush. I would love to see, Greg Rousseau get after some of those quarterbacks. Like we saw, that's one of the reasons why Jared Goff threw those 5 interceptions. That's just Patrick Mahomes has turned the ball over more than anybody in the NFL this year. Like, get after those quarterbacks, force them into some mistakes before they get a chance to test that back end of the pass defense.
For sure. I mean, you look at Jared Goff, you look at Matt Stafford, 2 of the quarterbacks are coming up against their statues. Brock Purdy will move around a little bit, but he can take some sacks too. And we already know Pat Mahomes. We've seen him plenty of times. He does some amazing things, but he also has turnover-worthy plays. Will the Bills be able to take advantage of that? The Chiefs are really good. I looked at the stats at protecting Mahomes. Like, I think the 3rd or 4th best pass blocking efficiency on the offensive line of anyone in the league. So I don't know, man. Pressure on Bobby Babbage this Sunday too to find some creative ways to make life uncomfortable for Mahomes. They've done really good in the regular season against this guy, and minus that 13 seconds, I thought they played. I don't want to say they played right. I take that back. I was going to say they played reasonably well last year against him in the playoffs, but that's actually not true. They did not play well against him whatsoever. But again, you're down Benford, you're down Bernard. There's a lot of factors in the play there with this defense.
Right. And remember how they play Mahomes and Lamar Jackson too. Like, they try to keep him in the pocket. They don't want him getting outside to create lanes. They want to just keep him really as contained as possible. So they're not necessarily going to get 8 sacks on Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson when they play against those guys. They're trying to keep them in a spot. They're trying to keep them from extending plays and creating stuff. They want to get them uncomfortable, just kind of standing in the same spot. And so it's not necessarily like they're going to get home on some of those pass rushes, but if they can execute their pass rush plan, that's more important than, getting him on the ground.
I had three kind of like biggest Bills keys over this next month to maintain the success they've had. One of them you just hit on. We kind of
Those front
talked
four.
about already. It's the front four. The front
Mhm.
four has to come to play. Von Miller has to play well. Greg Rizzo has to continue to play well. Ed Oliver, DeQuan Jones, whoever's playing defensive tackle, they got to make some plays. Simple as that. The front four being effective is going to be critical. This is not the Indianapolis Colts and Joe Flacco that you're playing against over the next month. This is not Trevor Lawrence in a bummy Jacksonville offensive line. These are good teams. And if your front four is not a big factor, you're going to get smashed. It's as simple as that. You're going to get smashed. That's one. Two of them I had, again, these notes before he signed or before his window opened, was Matt Milano coming back. Getting Matt Milano back to me is a huge key. So that's number two. We discussed that. And then the other one should be the one that's the most obvious, and that's Josh Allen. Him staying within himself, which I think he's done a remarkably good job, except for the Houston game. He's done a remarkably good job this season. A couple of mistakes here and there, but he has stayed within himself. He has taken what the defense has given him. He's made big plays on the move when the time is right, but he hasn't been forcing a lot this season. I think as a result, I don't think he's the MVP after 10 weeks, but I think he's very much in the mix. He's certainly in the MVP conversation right now. And starting this Sunday, you beat the Chiefs, you play well, you're right back at the top of the MVP list. If the Bills beat the Chiefs on Sunday and Josh Allen is the best player on the field on Sunday, which is certainly possible. In fact, you can almost say that it's going to be necessary for the Bills to beat the Chiefs. Josh Allen's right there back in the MVP, right dead smack in it. But anyway, he's the key. Not becoming hero Josh, staying within the self, having balance on the offense. This team, when I said it feels different to me than past years, I think they're better built to be able to run the ball with Cook and Davis, maybe Johnson a little bit. The screens to Shakir are working. Getting Kincaid back would be huge, of course. Mark Cooper is, we've only seen it for a little bit, but he's a big boost to this offense. But Josh Allen, at the end of the day, he's the engine. Him playing at the level that he's played at for the majority of this year is the single biggest key to withstanding this next month.
Yeah, no, that's 100% accurate. And, we've seen Josh Allen be able to take over games in key moments. And if he could, even against the Colts, he had that long run on 2nd and long after a couple holding calls, to convert a first down. If he can just be regular Josh most of the game and then super put on the cape for a couple plays in key moments, that's the secret sauce. And it's what we've really been talking about his entire career. You don't need to be a superhero on every play. You don't need to score a touchdown on every play or get 40 yards on every play. And he's finally playing within the offense, but knows when to put on the cape. And I think it's been so gratifying. It's so wonderful to watch him play this year, doing all of those things that we've been hoping he could do. And this is the game. Well, maybe not this particular game. Maybe we're hoping for the playoffs, but this is the type of game where you want to see if he can do that at the highest level against the highest competition.
What's funny is you go back to that Colts game, and in some ways it was a little bit lousy for Josh because of the 2 interceptions, missing daunting Kincaid when he was wide open for what would have been a touchdown. But even so, he doesn't seem to keep compounding mistakes with more mistakes. And when I say managing the game somewhat, doesn't mean that he's boring. It's not like he's going to take a dump off after dump off. I mean, even going back to the Indy game, just using that game as the bar. What about that throw on the run to Matt Collins for 44 yards to set up the field goal before the half? What about that dime he dropped to Dawson Knox for 34 yards? Just beautiful. You talked about that run, just a couple really good runs. So it's not like he's playing a snooze fest brand of football. He just seems to be a little more selective when he's doing it. It's still fun to watch. Look, at the end of the day, Matt, going these next 4 games, do you think it's fair to say if you go 2-2 over these next 4, 2 at home, 2 on the road, I don't think the Bills are overwhelmingly, they absolutely should win this game or they absolutely should lose this game. If you go 2-2 over the next 4, you're settling for that, right? If you could sign up right now, if I would have told you, hey, we're going to be 8-2 after 10 games in August. Would you sign up for that? You would have ran to write your name down on that contract. Would you sign up right now for 2-2 over the next 4?
Yeah, absolutely. If same thing, if you told me that the Bills were going to be 10-4 and like whatever it's going to be like 3 games up in the AFC East race, like absolutely, yeah. And I think that perspective is important because, I mean, I'm not going to say all Bills fans, but like a lot of Bills fans can be on opposite ends of the spectrum. Like they were coming
Right?
into the season thinking that the Bills were, going to beat everybody and run away with it. But then there's the others that are like, oh, it's going to be a complete reset of the season. They're going to, I mean, you heard all the talking heads. It's going to be second place, third place, fourth place in the division. So like the fact that they're almost at this point guaranteed a playoff spot, and that's really where the rubber meets the road. I think most fans are there, and actually, I mean, our comment numbers, I think, bear that out. Like folks just aren't talking about this team a ton right now. This week's going to change that, and then the 49ers and Lions games are going to change that because, I mean, who cares if they beat the Seahawks in October? Who cares if they beat the Colts in November? But like signing up for that 10-4 record in whatever, or in the middle of December with a chance to secure whether it's the 1, 2, 3 seed, host 1 or 2 home playoff games, like that's where they need to be. And so if they settle for that, I think that's okay. Obviously, we want them to be 10-2 by the end of this and in first place.
Sure. Yeah, 100%. Look, going 2-2, if you go 2-2 over your next 4, and then you look at the last, all right, so this stretch is murder. Guess what's not
Sure.
murder? The last 3 games, okay? Because you're playing the Patriots twice, and you got the New York lowly Jets sandwiched in between them in Orchard Park. I wouldn't be surprised if Aaron Rodgers, whether it's legitimate or not, has an injury and doesn't even end up playing by week 17. He might be done for the season and maybe his career by then. But if you go 2-2 and then you win those 3 games that you absolutely should win, what are you talking now? You're 13-4 for the season. That's a 13-4 regular season that almost certainly would get you a 2 seed. It feels to me like worst case right now, which is the product of not the next month, but the product of what you did to this point. Even if the Bills lost all these next 4 games, you sure as hell don't want to see that. But if the Bills lose all 4 of these next games, but then they still win their last 3, you're still worst case, you end up with 11 wins, and you're going to be the 4 seed in the playoffs. That's the worst case, but nobody wants to see that happen because I think it's mentally important for this team to play well over the next month. If they go 2-2, but it feels like they played reasonably well, it gives you the mental state that, hey, we know that we could play a good football in January. So I think for the team, who gives a shit about us or the fans, for the team itself to look pretty good and competitive, at worst case, really competitive over the next month, I think that'll bode well for them in January.
Well, yeah, if they're 0-4 over these next 4 games, then we could get to the end of the season with them having only 1 win over a playoff team, and that could be the Arizona Cardinals. So,
Right.
like, and that would be all the way back in week 1. So, like, if you get to the playoffs having, say, no wins over a playoff team or 1 win, because the Cardinals, like, could theoretically fall out of that playoff spot too. Like, get to the playoffs and you have no wins over the other playoff teams, then you look like the Miami Dolphins from last year, and then you go get smoked by the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, I mean, it would be nice to beat a playoff team, right? Like, so 0-4 would be, that would be problematic for me.
Look, last point here, then we're going to get out. So my mindset right now, and maybe this changes next week. If the Bills beat the Chiefs, I will convince myself that the Bills are going to end up being the number 1 seed. I'm just going to do it just because I'm an overreactor and I'm kind of dumb. But let's just say right now, my mindset is the 2 seed is the ceiling. And I think it's very, very, very much in play for the Bills, in part because of those last 3 games and how you come out over these next 4. Just real quick here. The other teams that would be in play for the 2 seed, obviously the Chiefs would be the 1. You would say Houston, Pittsburgh, and Baltimore. The Chargers only got like three losses, but they're not going to win their division, so it don't matter because the Chiefs are going to win that division. Correct. So Houston, Pittsburgh, Baltimore right now. Houston is 6-4, so they're already 2 games behind the Bills. They did beat the Bills head-to-head, so if they tied, that would matter. But Houston is 6-4, no Diggs. Collins is close to being back, but he's not back yet. But anyway, their schedule, so they're at Dallas, which now suddenly is not a tough game anymore. Tennessee at home, at the Jags, Miami at home. Those are 4. Houston should definitely win those. but then they're at Kansas City and they play Baltimore at home before finishing up again against Tennessee. 1 to 2 losses there, gets 5 losses. If you're talking about a 2 seed, the Bills aren't going to get the 5 losses. So Houston shouldn't matter. Pittsburgh 7-2. They're playing Baltimore at Cleveland, at Cincy, Cleveland at Philly, at Baltimore, Kansas City, Cincinnati. Dude, but Pittsburgh's 7-2 right now. They may end up 10-7 at the end of the season because that's a tough ass schedule. They're a good team. So I'm not too worried about them. Baltimore's the team. Baltimore's 7-3, and they beat the Bills. So they're only one game back to beat the Bills. They're at Pittsburgh. So if I'm a Bills fan with rooting interest, I feel like I'm rooting for Pittsburgh to win that game. Anyway, you're at Pittsburgh, at the Chargers, Philly, at the Giants, Pittsburgh again at home, at Houston, Cleveland. Optimistic point of view here to end the show. The Bills, even if they were to lose this game, but you certainly want to win against Kansas City. If the Bills beat the Chiefs, the Bills are so much to me in the driver's seat to be the 2 seed, play the 7 in the first round, and host also a divisional round game again like they did last year. It's looking good for the Bills. They have a real opportunity to be the 2 seed right now when you look at those schedules.
Yeah, I mean, the AFC North, we knew that they were going to beat up on each other. They haven't really played a ton of games against each other yet because all their division games are so backloaded, and that's one of the reasons why the Ravens and Steelers have really good records. And so, we even saw the Bengals play well this week in their loss to the Ravens. But so that AFC North is going to be beating each other up for sure. The Texans, it's so interesting because you kind of brushed off Miami. Like Miami's going to be clawing tooth and nail because that December 15th game might be their last hurrah, and they need to win out the rest of those games. And so I'm kind of hoping that Miami's still in it by then, and then we can root for the Dolphins, right? Yay, go Dolphins! To beat the Texans on December 15th. But yeah, that 3-game stretch for them versus Miami, at Kansas City, and then versus the Ravens is going to be gut check time for those Houston Texans.
I want to finish off with one point here. I'm not going to rule out the 1 seed. I will be all in on getting a 1 seed if the Bills win on Sunday. But if the Bills lose Sunday, even if they win Sunday, worst case, the 2 seed for me, there's 2 things that I really want to see with the Bills for the rest of the year. A is getting the 2 seed. Again, realistically here, getting the 2 seed, and also the Cincinnati Bengals not getting the 7 seed. That's what I really, really, really don't want to see. I do not want to see the Bills play the Cincinnati Bengals in a playoff game, just straight up. That is just a team that just feels like they have the Bills number. I want nothing to do with it. So as much as I love the Bills the thought of them being a 2 seed, I'd rather them be the 3 seed if it meant having to play the Bengals in the first round.
But we just talked about the AFC North schedule. So the Bengals have the Chargers, the Steelers, the Browns, Broncos, and Steelers still left on their schedule. They've already lost to the Ravens twice. So they still have a lot of those tough games coming up. Yeah, they also play the Titans. They also play at the Cowboys, but they still have a fair number of really difficult games that they would have to pretty much run the table to get into the playoffs at this point with how the other teams have the AFC conference record, tiebreaker, and just some other wins over them. So yeah, they're only 1 game out of a playoff race or out of a playoff spot right now, but they're going to have some very stiff competition in their own schedule.
Sure. I mean, you look at it, and again, we'll speculate a little bit more later on, but if you're going to put the Chargers as a wild card and the Steelers-Ravens division loser as a wild card, you got the Bengals, but they got 6 losses already, and you got Denver with only 5, but still I'm not high on Denver. And Miami.
Broncos, man.
It's insane to think that Miami's only a game out of a wild card spot right now, man. That is ridiculous to even think about, but I don't want to jump ahead of ourselves. Yeah, I'll tell you what, it's early in the week. I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm not doing one because I'll be doing a preview, but I want to get an official early in the week prediction for Sunday's game from Matt Warren. That's how we're going to bounce out of here. Give me a prediction.
All right. Let's go. I'm going to go Chiefs 21, Bills 20. I don't pick against the Bills very often, but the Chiefs they seem to keep finding ways to win. I know that the Bills are probably going to be down their top 2 pass catchers, maybe their top 3 pass catchers. I don't think that the running game is going to be very successful this week. I just think that Chiefs defense is very good. As you said, the Chiefs are very good at sustaining drives. I don't think the Bills are great necessarily at getting off the field when it matters most. So I just think that the Chiefs are going to do enough to continue drives and put enough points on the board where the Bills just aren't going to be able to handle it.
Well, that is certainly objective and very reasonable. I'm just going to tell everyone out there, send your hate tweets to @MattRichWarren, not to me. All right, buddy. It was
Thanks.
good having you on the show, man, as always.
Thank you. Good to be here.
All right, guys. I'll be back with a brand new show tomorrow.